Plea of the Damned 1 Forgive Me Lucy, written by Avril Sabine. Dedication. For everyone who has ever made a mistake, and wanted to take it back the moment it was made. Book description. Plea of the Damned. Have you ever done something and immediately wished you could undo it? Jack knows that feeling very well. He's damned, bound to haunt his old school and help students until he atones for his sins. It's the last thing he wants to do. But since the alternative is an eternity in hell, he's not about to say no. Book 1, Forgive Me Lucy. Each afternoon when Lucy has arrived home from school, she's found a white rose on her doorstep. Most people would be thrilled to have a secret admirer. She had been for a while, but it's become annoying not knowing who's leaving them. And if that wasn't bad enough, she now has a ghost wanting to know how he can help her. She doesn't have a problem and has no idea why he's pestering her. She's absolutely certain he's got the wrong person. Chapter 1. Jack. Jack Richards sloshed whiskey into his empty glass, some of it ending up on the kitchen bench. He ran his hand across the bench to mop up the spill, and only managed to smear the liquid further. After throwing back the contents of the glass, he wiped the back of one hand across his mouth as he slammed the glass on the bench. "Happy birthday," he muttered as he poured another shot, his hip supporting him against the edge of the kitchen cabinet where he slouched. "Happy 18th, son, now get your backside down to the factory. I've talked to my boss for you." He drained the glass again and stared inside it. Throwing it over his shoulder, he grinned in satisfaction at the sound of breaking glass, as he raised the nearly empty bottle to his lips. "As if it were my fondest dream to be like my old man." He pushed away from the bench, weaving towards the doorway into the living room. He grabbed the doorframe he collided with. "Art school ain't for pansies." His eyes zeroed in on the radio. He stumbled towards it and turned it on. The sound of Frank Ifield filled the room singing the Lovesick Blues. Jack glared at the radio and changed the station. He swore when he heard "Return to Sender" by Elvis Presley. He savagely yanked the radio cord from the wall and hurled the offending object across the room. The sound of the radio colliding with the wall, followed by the sound of breaking glass, brought Jack across the room, to kneel in front of his mother's wedding portrait, now lying on the ground with the broken radio. "No." He lifted the portrait, shaking glass from the frame. "No." The word was a wounded moan as he ran his finger over the scratch the glass had made in his mother's face. She looked so young. His age when she'd married her husband. Her veil had been borrowed from her best friend, since lace had been hard to come by in 1944. Her rich brown hair was a cloud around her face as it fell to her shoulders, looking as black as his in the black and white photograph. Dark eyes looked off to the right, and a smile was about to form. The scratch ran across one of her eyes. The eyes he'd inherited. He pressed the portrait to his chest as he rocked back and forth. Just like Rose, she'd left him too. It had been all about the Queen the past few months. Queen Elizabeth II, due to arrive next week. It was all anyone talked about. Who cared about the Queen? The only Elizabeth he cared about was dead and buried. He pulled the portrait away from his chest, to stare at the picture of his mother. Dead and buried. He stumbled to his feet, using his left hand to push himself up, barely noticing the glass that cut him and caused a slow drip of blood to fall on the flowered carpet. A drink. That's what he needed. And a cigarette. He found the bottle where he'd left it in the kitchen, but he was out of cigarettes. He'd have to get some. He placed the portrait carefully on the bench. "I'm sorry, Mum. I didn't mean to break your radio." He ran his finger over the scratch, staring at her damaged eye. The radio had been a birthday present. She'd like to listen to music and her cereals while she did the housework. Her last birthday present. She'd only been able to enjoy it a few months before she was gone. Stolen from him. Pain filled him and he reached again for the bottle. It didn't help. The pain remained. A cigarette. That's what he needed. He paused halfway out of the room. He'd have to pass the school. The school and Rose. And Arthur. His hands became fists. It was all Arthur's fault. He'd been after Rose for years. He wasn't going to let him keep her. Rose was his. He was sick of losing people in his life. She might not be dead, but Rose might as well be for all the attention she paid him. Jack straightened his shoulders. He was going to get her back, and there was nothing Arthur could do to stop him. He strode towards his father's bedroom. Not if Arthur wanted to see another day.